Well, that was the answer. I simply put this down on my bench block and pressed on the top of that shaft with my wooden block, and that popped into place. And when I put the advance knob on here, you can see that the advance knob will rotate anti-clockwise, and I'm able to hold that in position. Going the other way, the knob would just want to undo. It just can't. It can't turn the shaft the other way. So that little piece is good. That could go back on the top of the camera now. But I'll pop that to one side. I'm interested in another component over here, which is a multiple pieces. This video camera can catch up, it is. So we've got a little pawl here, sprung loaded. I'm going to have to flush that carefully with solvent to make sure it's not sticky. And we have this piece here. Now this will provide some controlled friction. You can see that that grease has gone nasty and sticky. Now we'll want all that out because we want that piece to move, not just be glued in place. And with that sticky old grease in there, that's exactly what would have happened. You'd find that instead of moving in a controlled fashion, providing some controlled friction so that things stay where they're put, but move when you need them to, and it all needs things to be nice and clean. Now this pawl here, I'm just going to flush that with a bit of naphtha. I want to make sure there's no old grease underneath that thing that's going to stick it, because it needs to move promptly. It needs to fall into position promptly. No hesitation, no sticking. If it stays stuck out, you'll find that you won't end up with things moving as they should. I can see when I look at this in the light that there's still grease on there. Even though I've wiped that down, there's still a film of dirty, sticky old grease on that surface. Well, if that's on the surfaces I can get to and I can see easily, you can assume that the same sort of problem exists in places that you can't see, like underneath levers. Alright, I'll pop that to one side. They can be lubricated and put back together. Is there anything else I need to take great note of here? No, I think that's probably about it. The other stuff I can clean as I put it back on the camera. Let's just open up the front of that camera so that at least the thing will sit on the table nicely. There's our film advance shaft. Get that in position. I presume that those screw holes are equidistant. We're about to find out. It's not where it wants to be. Watch what I'm doing. That's where the strap lug, or the bracket for the strap lug fits, which can go on next. Alright, get these three screws down and tight. I'll put that advance knob on there. Check that that turns smoothly. Yes, it does. When you go the other way, the shaft doesn't want to move, so you can unscrew the knob. That's good. The strap lug. I'll just clean this. I'm just off camera behind you here, I think, while I clean this with a bit of naphtha. Of course, this is there's no working parts on this. It's a stationary item, so we don't have to worry about lubrication. That's good. Some of these other parts, I'll just clean them and we'll put them in place. Right, we'll start putting some of these components back on the camera, I think. This little gear goes on. I think that goes on first. It has to engage with this wheel. That looks right. I'll just check that that revolves smoothly by turning this shaft here. That appears to be good. Now, we had this piece and this piece went together. I'm going to give that a wipe with some synthetic grease. It just clipped together. This gear, I'll run some synthetic grease through that. And that gear goes here and meshes with the others. The two pins on this piece mesh with that gear down there. You can get it seated. There we go. So as the film's drawn through the camera, that'll revolve. Our gear here engages with that pawl, our little ratchet here rather. See if I can get that seated correctly. That goes on there like that. Okay. I think we had a washer and then a spacer, a spacer and then a washer. I can't remember which. I think this washer went on there first, then that. And then the film advance knob. Let's see how that looks. That's fine, that would turn our film, and of course as the film would roll through the camera it would roll this wheel over, which would revolve this part, which looks after our metering of film, if you like, the amount of film that's going to be pulled through the camera. Alright, what's next? Right, while the camera was doing nothing, I was busy talking. Basically, I just put this component back in place. Alright, the next piece. That little bracket goes on. That has a return spring which has to go around a shoulder on the mounting screw. See if I can get this post screwed in. Make sure that neither the spring nor the lever itself is trapped underneath the screw, that it revolves around the shoulder. That's fine. I'll hook its spring over the post, so it's sprung loaded. Add a washer on the top. Put the film advance knob on there. Now, if I revolve the film advance knob and revolve the sprocket, the roller, with my thumb at the same time, it's locked the film advance. If I cock the shutter, zoom you out a bit, cock the shutter, release the shutter, that frees up the film advance locks again, cock the shutter, release the shutter, rewind on till the film advance locks, cock the shutter, release the shutter, wind on, etc. So the film advance is working smoothly. It interlocks with the shutter release. So that part's all good. Let's take that knob off. Got to get this one back in place. This resets that mechanism. This lever from the top of the camera was more complex than I was expecting. It's got a sprung loaded section at the end here where the button goes. And I'm not abundantly clear as to why that should have that. That was held together with a screw. And the screw was loose, so it was getting ready to abandon ship. So that certainly depresses. This lever goes on the top of the camera here, and it has a return spring here. You can get that hooked in place. Right, like that. And I'm still not entirely sure why that button should depress, what the purpose of that is. Do you have to depress it in order for it to slide? I think you do, because it goes through a little narrow gap here. You have to depress it down and then slide it along. And I think it wasn't doing that before because it didn't have its the screw wasn't tight, so that this would have been sitting at a different height. Okay, so that sits on the top of the camera like that. And what does it do? It's not being held by anything here, is it? It's only held by the rangefinder, so we'll just have to hold my finger on that. So if this was locked, would this reset that? Not that I can see. So what is its purpose? I think it really resets the frame counter. Not entirely clear on that. Well, I'm sure it'll become more clear later on. Anyway, I want to lubricate under here. And I will give that, I'm going to wipe that with molybdenum paste because I don't want this getting sticky. Because that's what caused the problems with it before. I'll get the return spring hooked into place. It must sit like that. Okay, so I think that part is good to go. Next I really need to deal with that rangefinder, so I'm going to have a look at that and decide what's going to happen to it. Decide how much cleaning it'll require and how I'm about to go about it. I've decided with the rangefinder I'm going to be exceptionally cautious about the cleaning. I'm going to do the minimum, the least invasive cleaning, because I don't want to get into trouble with the semi-silvered mirror in particular, because I don't have a replacement for it and it may be very hard to get one in place. So we'll leave that, I think. See if we can get this in position. Oh, it's easy when you know how. Now I do have a stray washer which I believe may have come out from underneath the rangefinder, and it may space it up off the deck so that this lever will move smoothly. So I think we'll leave it out at the moment and see if we can see what the action's like. If it doesn't appear to be necessary, we'll leave it out. It's certainly a singleton. It's not, there's 3 screws hold this rangefinder down to the camera casting, but we only have 1 washer. So it's by no means clear. But there's no problem with the movement of this. And I can see that the rangefinder mechanism here is moving smoothly. So that washer I think we'll ignore for the moment. That screw head's quite chewed up. Let's take it back out. I might find a better screw for that. I don't think it's the right screw for the job. I'll find a better example. The hole is certainly recessed. I'm not sure that's the best screw to be there. It would certainly do the job. I'll see if I've got a better example. I'm lucky here that this is basic. A lot of this is like a Retina, and the fasteners are certainly like those you'd strike in a Retina. So some of my spares should probably do the job. Just comparing these screws here to get one that's an appropriate length, and preferably with a similar head shape. If it's too long, it'll stick down into the body cavity, of course. If it's too short, it may not engage enough threads into the body to hold things securely. Snap. That one looks okay. Let's see how that goes. That's better. That's just like a bought one. That's how it would have looked when it left the factory. So I have my prism here at the end, and I'll clean the glass surface on this end. This semi-silvered mirror I'm going to leave entirely alone. I think there's too much risk I'll end up making a mess of that. My prism here, I'm just looking at the state of this, that's dirty on the front surface, so I'll clean that too. Well, I've cleaned the readily accessible surfaces on that rangefinder. I'm quite happy with its performance. The image contrast is quite good. I certainly don't think I'd get any substantial improvement doing anything else short of replacing the semi-silvered mirror. Surface silvered mirrors, particularly semi-silvered mirrors, they're exceptionally delicate. This one's got like a gold coating on it. I know from experience you've only got to breathe on them hard, it seems like the coating disappears, so I just won't do it. But I've got this adjusted. The position of the prism on the end here, that was our horizontal adjustment. The screw on the corner that I thought was an adjustment screw, a eccentric, that was certainly an eccentric. This is located on a post which it pivots about. The two screws that hold this prism down to the rangefinder body, they just lock it in place basically. Most of the work is the eccentric and the pivot point where this thing sits down into it. So that was easy enough. I had a vertical alignment problem with my images. That was dealt with by adjusting these two screws on the top of that little prism and basically slacken one, tighten the other one up, and that just rotates that whole business and vertically aligns your images. So the images are aligned horizontally and vertically. They meet nicely at infinity. And next really I just need to put the frame counter stuff on here and clean my top cover. Well, we can put our spring on there. And this little cam that the frame counter catches to, I noticed something interesting about that. It's got a tiny raised step on one tooth. The edge of that's chewed away. I don't know whether it would cause a problem or not. It's certainly set to engage with that lever. There's a hole here that in this frame counter disc engages with, and now that's ready for the top cover to be put in place. So I better clean it. Okay, get my top cover back on. Doesn't matter how many times you clean things, you still see bits you should have seen the back of. Let's just lift that off. That's better. Okay, so there was one small screw at each end of the top cover. It's hardly got anything to engage a screwdriver on. We have our strap lugs. Now strap lugs, I can tell you from experience that they're not interchangeable typically. You want to take note of which end of the camera they came from. See, that one I'd have to rotate that probably another 20 degrees or so in order to get that to look vertical. That's probably achievable, but much more than that you wouldn't want to do it. You'd end up breaking something. That one's in much the same state, so I don't think we've got anything to win or lose on this one. We'll just have to rotate these into position. That's good. Our shutter release button. And I'll have to use a tool of some sort to tighten that up. And of course our advance knob. Now I will hold that spool loosely on the inside while I do that up, just so that it doesn't come loose through someone casually grabbing at it. The take-up spool, that better go back into the back of the camera. There's that done, okay. That's it. And the cover for the top plate. I better get that clean. Here we have our accessory shoe, and I noticed it had a piece of paper underneath it, which was unexpected. This shoe looks similar to what you'd find on a Retina. And this top cover plate, you can remove this to adjust the rangefinder, which is exactly what I did previously, and what you'd need to do, because the you can't see through the finder without the benefit of the eyepiece on the top cover. In that way it's similar to a Retina 1B, I think, is like that, the important optical component in the top cover. Most of the other models just have plain glass there. Right, one last tiny screw. Those in, tighten those up in sequence. Click. Do up those screws on the accessory shoe. That in the main is the camera done. I'll have to give it a bit of a wipe over, a bit of a polish, but I'm happy with the state of that. Look at this cover here at the back for the window. It's very stiff. I wonder if it's been pushed in or whether it's dried grease that's done that. There's a limit to how much I can do with that. Let's give that a wipe on those visible surfaces. I think it's picked up some dust and grit over time, and that's probably made it stiff. You need to view the red window here to start your film. When you load the film, you have to bring it up to the start line, and then you can close that and set the counter and go from there. Alright, well I think that's about it as far as repairing this particular camera goes. I will make a video on how to load and use this model, I think, but perhaps not now.